Britain is not just trembling, it is cracking. And this time, the warning is coming from the very top of the monarchy. What was once whispered behind palace walls has now erupted into open fury as King Charles confronts a nation spiralling into chaos under Keir Starmer's leadership. This is not rumour, this is not speculation. This is a moment that could redefine Britain's future. The eruption did not happen in public, it happened behind closed doors inside the most guarded rooms of Buckingham Palace. According to senior palace insiders, King Charles has reached a breaking point. Briefings laid out before him detailed a country unravelling at speed, arrests mounting by the day, protests crushed before they could form, communities silenced not by debate, but by force. What the king saw was not governance, it was control. And for a monarch sworn to uphold unity, it was unbearable. Britain under Starmer is no longer governed by consent. It is governed by fear. Streets once filled with debate now echo with barons. Town halls once meant for discussion have become flashpoints for removal and detention. Citizens who ask questions are labelled threats. Workers who protest are branded extremists. Even grieving families struggling under rising taxes and collapsing services are finding themselves targeted by an increasingly aggressive state apparatus. Inside the palace, aides describe an atmosphere of shock and urgency. Footage from across the country has reportedly left the king deeply disturbed. Elderly citizens restrained by police, young people detained for chanting slogans, veterans dragged from demonstrations. These images, officials say, cut through any remaining illusion that Britain was merely experiencing political tension. This was something darker, something systemic. The king's anger, sources claim, is not symbolic, it is personal. He has reportedly warned that the government is dismantling the very trust that holds the nation together. In one tense of the exchange, Starmer was allegedly told that order imposed without legitimacy is not order at all, but collapse delayed. For a constitutional monarch to speak this bluntly is almost unheard of. It signals how grave the situation has become. Meanwhile, the streets tell their own story. Protests that once focused on taxes and living costs have transformed into a nationwide rejection of authority that no longer listens. Farmers stand beside teachers, pensioners march alongside students. The message is no longer about policy, it is about dignity. And the government's response has been chilling. Expanded police powers, emergency measures rushed through Parliament, vague laws that turn attendance into guilt and silence into survival. Reports continue to surface of temporary detention centres operating with limited oversight. Families left without information, legal challenges delayed or dismissed in the name of stability. Legal experts warn that fundamental protections, once untouchable in Britain, are being hollowed out quietly, efficiently, and without meaningful resistance from those in power. Starmer, however, remains defiant, publicly calm, privately unmoved. At recent appearances, he has brushed off criticism, framing unrest as manipulation and dissent as danger. The language is deliberate. It shifts blame away from the state and onto the citizen. It tells the public that obedience is patriotism and questioning is betrayal. This is where King Charles now stands at the centre of an impossible storm. Constitutionally restrained, yet morally cornered. Silent, yet increasingly judged by that silence. Insiders say the pressure on him to act has never been greater. Calls for a national address are growing louder by the day. Not to overthrow a government, but to remind it of the line it must not cross. The last time Britain faced a crisis that forced the monarchy into such a delicate position, history was rewritten. And now, once again, the question hangs heavy over the nation. Will the king remain a spectator as Britain descends further into chaos, or will this eruption mark the moment the crown draws a line between authority and abuse? Because make no mistake, this is no longer politics as usual. This is a fight over the future of Britain itself, and the clock is ticking. As the crisis deepens, Britain is beginning to look less like a stable democracy and more like a nation under internal lockdown. What is unfolding now is not spontaneous unrest, but a slow tightening of control that reaches into every corner of public life. Across the country, police presence has intensified far beyond crowd management. Officers are no longer responding to disorder, they are preempting it. Roads are blocked before protests form. Community gatherings are monitored, names are logged, phones are checked. And for many, the realisation has landed with a chilling clarity. Simply being present is now enough to be detained. Under newly expanded public order and stability powers, authorities no longer need clear evidence of wrongdoing. Suspicion is sufficient. Association is enough. Intent is assumed. In practice, this has turned everyday citizens into potential targets. A shared post, a forwarded message, a brief appearance at a rally. Any of it can trigger a knock at the door. Inside government circles, this approach is being justified as necessary. Officials insist Britain is facing coordinated destabilisation and that extraordinary times demand extraordinary measures. But critics warn that this language is dangerously familiar. It reframes dissent as sabotage and transforms political disagreement into a security threat. Once that shift is made, there are no limits. And many believe that limit has already been crossed. Reports from inside holding facilities describe overcrowded conditions, limited access to legal counsel, and prolonged detention without charge. Families describe waiting days, sometimes weeks, without information. Lawyers speak of barriers erected in the name of national interest. This is not chaos spilling out of control. It is control being deliberately imposed. The effect on society has been immediate and corrosive. Trust in institutions has collapsed at speed. Local councils are divided between enforcing directives and protecting their communities. Some comply out of fear, others quietly resist, delaying cooperation or leaking information. In Scotland and parts of Wales, officials have openly questioned the legitimacy of the emergency measures, setting the stage for constitutional confrontation. Britain is no longer moving as one nation. It is fragmenting under pressure. Media silence has only intensified public anger. Major outlets have scaled back coverage. Headlines soften language. Arrests become removals. Detentions become precautionary actions. But the public is not blind. Independent journalists, citizen reporters, and online creators have stepped into the vacuum, documenting what traditional media will not, and for that, many are paying a price. Accounts suspended, revenue streams cut, warnings issued behind closed doors. The message is subtle but unmistakable. Speak carefully or don't speak at all. International reaction has added another layer of strain. Britain's allies are watching closely and not quietly. Human rights organisations have raised alarms about mass detentions and vague legal standards. Diplomatic inquiries are increasing. Abroad, Britain is no longer cited as a model of democratic stability, but as a cautionary tale of how quickly norms can erode when fear replaces accountability. This reputational damage cuts deep, striking at the very identity Britain has long projected to the world. And looming over all of this is the unresolved role of the monarchy. King Charles remains publicly silent, but that silence grows heavier by the day. Supporters argue he must stay neutral. Critics argue neutrality has become complicity. Petitions calling for intervention are surging. Private letters flood palace offices. Former civil servants and retired judges have broken tradition to speak openly, urging the king to defend the principles his position represents, not to rule, not to interfere, but to remind the nation of what it stands to lose. Inside government, anxiety is rising. Leaked communications suggest officials are aware that public compliance is thinning. Each arrest fuels more anger. Each crackdown creates more resistance. What began as an attempt to impose order is now accelerating instability. History offers countless warnings about this moment, the point where authority doubles down instead of stepping back, where control becomes the objective, not governance. Britain is now balanced on that edge, a nation where fear and defiance exist side by side, where citizens whisper instead of debate, where loyalty is measured by silence, and where a single decision from a single institution could either pull the country back from the brink or push it further into the darkness. The question is no longer whether Britain is in crisis. The question is how much further it will be allowed to fall.